Hello and welcome. I'm Smiley, and today we'll be talking about the Trinity. Recently, I was on the phone with a relative and we were just catching up. And while we were talking, we started talking about God. The person that I was talking to was expressing some confusion on how to explain the Holy Trinity. So they asked me, how is God three people? And to this question, I asked them, is your shadow you? And they were confused at first as to why I was asking this question. They were like, why are you asking me that question? And I was like, well, is your shadow you? And they answered, yes. And I explained to them, well, that's how I would explain the Holy Trinity. Your shadow is just you displayed in another dimension. And they were satisfied with this answer. However, whenever I have a way of explaining something, I always try to think about what questions someone might end up asking me about my explanation or the answer that I've given them. So after this conversation, I asked myself, how can I use this example to explain the Trinity if someone were to ask me this question or that question? And every single time I was able to come up with an answer to these questions using what I'm going to call the shadow method. I don't know if it has a name or if somebody else has named it or has thought of this before, but I'm just going to call it the shadow method. And I'm just going to give you a few questions that I asked myself about the Holy Trinity and the shadow method in and of itself. So the first question that I asked myself was, well, what if the person that I was talking to on the phone answered alternatively? What if they answered, no, your shadow is not you? And to that question, I essentially answered in my head with a somewhat rhetorical question. Have you ever pulled somebody over to the side to have a personal conversation, but then thought, ooh, I got to be careful about what I say because there's another entity in the room? No. And that's because you're naturally accepting that shadow as a display of that person's existence. You've naturally accepted that shadow as an extension of that person's existence. And then I went on to ask myself some more questions. So I asked myself one of the more common rebuttals to the Holy Trinity. It's around Matthew 24, verse 36, about Jesus not knowing the day nor the hour of the return. How can Jesus be God but not know the day nor the hour? And using the shadow method, since we've come to the conclusion that my shadow is still me, the same way my shadow doesn't know my skin color or my eye color. Depending on the dimension that you're in, depending on the limits and the constraints of your existence, there will be things that you can and cannot do, will and will not know. If you are struggling to explain the Holy Trinity to someone, maybe this method may be able to help you. And if you ever have questions about the Holy Trinity yourself, maybe trying to break it down by using the shadow method may help you be able to answer the questions that you or those around you may have. That's all for this week. So, as per usual, I am not going to do all that, but